the sum if, count if, average if functions, and then newer versions, sum ifs, count ifs, average ifs, and the various other versions, allow you to do some quite complex calculations that you often can only do in a pivot table. So we're going to go through them first. Now just understand that, for example, if I go and I find COUNTIF, you'll see that COUNTIF was the original version, and there's now a new version called COUNTIFs. We are going to teach the COUNTIFs, the plural, because the COUNTIFs can easily do what a COUNTIF can do, and it gives you more options. So you may as well learn the one version rather than learn this one and then have to learn this one. So what is COUNTIFs? It allows you to do a couple of things. So for example, I've got a little database here, and the first thing I want to do is I want to work out how many salespeople are in department A, B, C. If we gave this to you on a piece of paper, it would be very simple. You just go here and say, I'm looking for department A. Let me count 1, 2, 3. So the function that does a similar type of thing in here is the function called COUNTIFs. So just look for the plural. And you'll see it asks you two very simple questions. It says, where is the criteria range and what is the criteria? Now just to make it easy on yourself, we suggest you always look at the criteria first. So you'll notice I've clicked on criteria 1. And because of the ifs part of it, we actually can choose many criteria. But for now, we're just going to do single criteria. So this criteria, we're going to say, please look at that cell over there. Because now that we know we're looking for the A's, we can go back to the criteria range and tell Excel where it will find these letters. So I'm going to highlight this. And inevitably, these are dollar signs, because they always look at the same table. So I'm going to put my dollar signs on. In this case, that should be enough. We're not going to use criteria range 2 or any further. And when I say OK, you'll notice it says 3. So it has gone through this list and said 1, 2, 3. If I copy it down, this one here, it looks for the B's. It comes here, 1, 2. So what COUNTIFs does is it looks at a listing and counts how many times it sees whatever your criteria is. Now we want to work out by department how many units were sold. So if I gave this to you on a piece of paper, what you would do, you'd look and you say, I'm looking at department A. Let me find all the department A's and then add them up. So there's an A, I'm going to add that one up. There's another A, I'm going to add that one up. There's another A, I'm going to add that one up. Everything that we've done there, looking here, and looking here, you need to tell Excel. In this case, the function we're going to use, because we're summing, is called SUMIFs. And you'll see it's very similar to the COUNTIFs, except it's added one more criteria, which is the sum range. So what this is saying is once it's gone through all these things, what must it add up? So we're going to say it's the total units sold. So we're going to say, please, in the end, you need to add up that. I'm going to put my dollar signs on. Now we're going to give it its criteria. So it's asking for the criteria range 1 and criteria 1. We recommend click on do the criteria first because it's easier to figure it out. So that's my criteria. So where must Excel go look for the criteria? Let's go look over here. Put my dollar signs on. And when I say OK, copy it down, you'll see it's now going. So for department B, it's saying there's a B. I'm going to use that one. Here's another B. I'm going to use that one. Total comes to 19. Just to again have a look at what it's doing, if you look at what Excel is seeing, the sum range, all it's done is it's listed all the numbers. Criteria range, it's listed all the letters, and it now knows it's looking for an A. So what is very important when you do this is that the criteria range and the sum range must be the same size. So you can't have, for example, 8 items in this list and 9 items in this list. They must be the same size. Exactly the same as these ones, there's also an average ifs. So we want to know what is the average sales by department A, the total sales. So you'll see if you go look for average, you'll see there's average if and average ifs. We're using the plural. Exactly the same as the sum range. It wants to know what it will eventually average. I'll highlight that there. What's the criteria range? Remember, go to the criteria first. I'm looking for that. Where must Excel look for it? Here in the department. And when I say OK, it tells me the average. And you'll see we now know that the average for department B is 475. Let's check. That's department B. It's that one. That's department B, it's that one. And you'll see the sum is 950, but the average is 475. Just be careful here. You'll see we've got a sum here. This is a nonsense figure, so we'd rather delete that. In this example, we've got a whole bunch of people and their goal for the year. We can also see what business unit they are targeting, what business unit they're in, and the sales so far for the year. What we want to do is summarize this so it bases on the business unit. So for example, I must add up all the retails. So firstly, we want to know what the total goal is and the total sales are. And if you do it carefully, you should be able to create the formulas here and simply copy and paste them here, and it should work. Just think about the dollar signs. The solution to this example, over here, what we want to do is we want to add up all the goal values where the business unit is retail. So what we're going to use the sum ifs. What must we add up? So eventually Excel is going to have to add up the goal. And for now, we're just going to put full dollar signs on it. The criteria range, we do the criteria first. So the criteria for this one is that's the business unit. Where must it go look for that business unit? Over here, I'm going to put the dollar signs on. I'm going to say OK. You'll see it gives me a number, and I should be able to copy it down. And it gives me these numbers. You can see that ties in with that, so that must be correct. Now if we copy and paste this, you'll see it's giving us incorrect numbers or zeros. You could obviously rebuild this, but what we're going to do is we're going to just work on the dollar signs here just to make it that it's copyable. So the first thing we've got is we're saying look at the sum range. It's looked over here. Now we know that when it's here it must look straight up. When it's over here it should rather look at the sales. However, as we copy it down, it must always look at row 11 to row 26. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this formula so that there's no dollar signs on the letters. So we've only got the dollar signs on the rows, on the numbers. So this way, when I'm here, it'll always look straight up. When I'm here, it'll look straight up. But as you copy it down, it'll keep looking at row 11 to row 26. Let's go to our criteria next. At the moment we're saying look here. If we copy this across, if we leave it like that, it's going to look adjacent here. So what we needed to do is always look in column B. So the way we do that is we put a dollar sign in front of the B, but we need the row to change because remember, as we copy down, we wanted to look at row 32 retail, row 33 industrial, etc. What about the criteria range? The criteria range is looking for retail and it's looking over here. When we copy it to these cells, we still need it to look here. So in this case, dollar signs everywhere, looks like it's correct. So when I say OK, just paste that down. And I'm now going to copy this, and when I paste it in sales, notice it's given us the same number, and that's because we've used the dollar signs in a clever way to make sure it's looking at all the key aspects. In this example, we've got a number of students, and here's a detailed listing of all the invoices we've issued lately. What we want to know is by student, how many invoices did we issue? So that's student 100, 129, there's one there, etc. So how many? What is the total of the tuition fees, total of the accommodation, total of the extras? And if you build it carefully, these here you should be able to build the first one and then copy it across. The solution to this exercise: first look at the number of events. So this is the number of events. So it looks like we want to count. So it's 1, 2. So this is going to be a count ifs. So let's build our count ifs. We're going to start with the criteria first, and we're going to tell it that we want to look at that student number over there. Where must it go look for that student number? I'm going to highlight this column here and put the dollar signs in. And when I say OK, you'll see it tells me 3. If I copy this down, you'll see it gives me 25. So that total seems to match. And we now know that there are 3 invoices for that student number, 2 for that one, etc. The next thing we want to do is work out what the total tuition fees come to. So in this case, we want to sum. So it's the sum ifs. What are we eventually going to sum? We want to sum this column here, and I'm going to put my dollar signs on. We're going to do the criteria first. So the criteria for this one is that student number. Now I know I'm going to copy it across, and I know the student number is always going to be in column A. So I'm actually going to put a dollar sign on the A. Where must Excel look for that student number? I must look over here. I'm going to put my dollar signs on. And in this case, it's always going to look for the student number here, no matter where it goes. So those dollar signs are correct. If I leave it like this, it'll work fine. It'll copy here. But if I copy it across, what will happen is it'll keep adding up tuition fees, because we told it the sum range is always column C and always row 24 to 2048. We know that as we copy it across, when we're in C, it must look at column C. When we're in D, it must look at column D. So I'm going to get rid of the dollar signs here in front of the column. And when I say OK, we get an answer. Let's copy it down. Okay, so that looks correct. And now I should be able to copy and paste it across, because each of these now has been set up in such a way that it's always looking at the student number, column A, always looking at the matching student numbers, column B, but when it's subtotaling or when it's summing, it then moves across as the formula is copied across. In this example, we have 2 lists that we want to reconcile. As you can see, these lists are different sizes, but they should in theory be exactly the same size, and the common field is this transaction ID. So we want to figure out this 101 to 9. Not only is it here, but check if it's here too many times, because each of these items should appear only once on each side. The solution to this example: we could use a VLOOKUP. The problem with a VLOOKUP though is, for example, this transaction number, it would look here, and if it found it, for example over here, it would say it found it. But it would be useful to know that it appears twice. So in reconciling, not appearing and appearing more than once are just as important. So we're going to use rather count ifs. We're going to count how many times this transaction ID appears over here. So we're going to create, and we're going to use the count ifs function. We're going to go to the criteria first. We're going to say the criteria is this transaction ID with no dollar signs. And where must it compare to? It must compare to this column here, and we're going to put the dollar signs on. When I say OK, you'll see it tells me that that appears twice. I can copy it down, and you'll see as you go down, sometimes these items are not appearing at all. So you need to reconcile and figure out why this one appears twice and why some of them aren't appearing. We must also do it the other way. So in this case, we now want to work out this transaction ID. Does it appear here? It's the same logic. We're going to do count ifs. The criteria, we're asking it to look up that in this area here. Put the dollar signs on. It tells us it appears once. When I double click it, you'll see that there's certain items that are not in this list. So now you've quite quickly worked out which items are common to the lists and which items are appearing more than once. You can then quickly check what the problem is and hopefully complete your reconciliation. In this example, we need to make payments for salaries. We've got the branch account and bank account number, surname, salary. We just want to check if any of the bank account numbers are duplicated. Are there any phantom or ghost employees? The solution to this example, so what we need to do is we need to check, does this bank account number ever appear again here? So another way of saying that is, please Excel count how many times you see this bank account number in this entire list. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a count ifs. So I'm going to look it up. So what is the criteria we're looking for? We're going to say, please look at that bank account number. Where must it go and look for all these bank account numbers? So this is the case where you actually refer to the same column. So I'm going to highlight that and I'll put my dollar signs on. So what we're telling Excel to do is to look for that bank account number in all of this list. When you copy down, it'll look here in the whole list again. What you expect to see is a 1. What you don't expect is any more than that. If I click OK, you'll see it's got a 1. I'll copy it. And if you look, you'll see there's cases where there's 3 and 2. So you can now, probably best using the filter, go and figure out these 2s and 3s. Who do they belong to? What are the bank account numbers? Who are the people? Are they legitimate? And why are the bank account numbers the same? In this example, every month we receive a report from our system that looks something like this. So this is 1 month, and notice that the closing bank balance is on row 38. And the next month, same report, but now the closing bank balance is on 31. So these move around. What we want to do is we want to create something that pulls through the key information we want. So we want the opening bank balance, the closing bank balance, etc., so that we can create ratios and graphs on it. But what we don't want to do is have to manually go and say, okay, in this case it's over here, and on the other one it's on another line. So we want to automatically bring through total opening bank balance, and Excel must go and find the correct number. The solution to this example, so we could use a VLOOKUP here, but we're going to rather use a sum ifs. So what we want to do is to tell Excel to, in this cell, look at that description, find it over here, and then sum any item that repeats itself. And in this case we probably won't have any repeats, but it's just to show you that this can work similar to a VLOOKUP. So we're going to go and do sum ifs. So what's the sum range? So I'm going to highlight this whole area, and because I plan to use it each month, I'm actually going to highlight enough that can handle any amount. So you'll see I go up to this border. I'm going to put the dollar signs on. Criteria range 1. First I do the criteria. The criteria on this one is, what is that description? And because I know we always want to look at column C, I'm going to put a dollar sign in front of the C. In the criteria range, I know that it must always look at this column C. I'm going to put dollar signs everywhere. If I leave it like this, when I copy across, even though I'm in column I, it'll keep adding up column D because we put dollar signs everywhere here. So I'm just going to remove the dollar signs from the letters, from the D. And when I say OK, I get 458190. That looks like it's right. Let's just copy it down. It's always useful to check. So journal entries processed 65261. can see that's working out. And I should now be able to copy it across. It looks good, and just doing a couple of checks, you can see the numbers seem to make sense. So that's working out well. The benefit of this though is I can now take these calculations, copy them, and if I go to 5b, which is set up exactly the same way, I should be able to just go here, click here, and paste it. And let's just do some checks. You can see that number's the same, opening bank balance, that number's the same, etc. So what it means is that each month, instead of you spending half your day matching individually, let the sum ifs do it for you, find the number, bring it through. Sometimes, instead of looking for something specific like Department A, you may want to look for a bigger than or less than type situation. So for example, I want to know how many people here sold more than 10 units. So manually I know it would be not that one, that's not more than 10, that's equal to 10. So it's going to be 1, 2. So how do you do it with a COUNTIF? We're counting. So I'm going to go find COUNTIFs, the plural. We always start with the criteria, and my criteria here is I'm looking for bigger than 10. So I can just type in bigger than 10. You just need to remember to put in your inverted commas. Where must Excel go find the bigger than 10s? We highlight it over here and we put our dollar signs in. And when I say OK, you'll see it gives us a 2. So what it's done is it's gone through this list, found anything bigger than 10, it's gone 1, 2. If we wanted to tweak this, we could change this and say bigger than and equals to, and you'll see it now it gives us 3 because of that 10. But let's just go back to the bigger than. We can do a similar thing when it comes to working out the value. So we still want to know the people that sold more than 10, but we actually don't want to add up the units sold. We don't want to count it. We actually want to work out the total sales. What is the value of those people? So in this case, we're going to do some sort of a sum. So I'm going to say sum ifs. What must it eventually add up? It must go and add up these items here. Put my dollar signs on. What is the criteria range? Remember, I'm going to rather go do the criteria first. In inverted commas, I'm going to say bigger than 10, close inverted commas. Where must it go look for the bigger than 10? Point out the units sold, put my dollar signs on, and when I click OK, it tells me 1,350. So if I go look here, that person sold 12, so I'm going to add them, 15, add them, you'll see 1,350. So you can actually use bigger than, less than, equals to work through a data set and accumulate what the answer would be. COUNTIF, SUMIF, average if, max if, any of the new ifs type functions. In this example, we've got an income statement, and all we want to know is how many months are negative and how many months are positive. So we want to know that there's, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4 negative months and the rest are positive. The solution to this example, because we effectively want to know how many, that implies a count. So we're going to use our count ifs. So I'm going to go find count ifs. The criteria first that I look at is it looks like I want to know how many negative and positive months. So is it bigger or less than 0? So in the criteria, I'm going to type less than 0 and just put my inverted commas. And then I'm going to just tell Excel where to look for less than 0. So I'm going to highlight that section there. Put my dollar signs, and when I say OK, it tells me there are 4 items that are less than 0, negative. I can do the same thing, or in this case, copy it down. It gives me the 4. That's because at the moment it's looking for less than 0. I'm just going to tweak that and say bigger than 0. And when I say OK, I get 8. So as the year progresses, we'll be able to see how many are positive, how many are negative. In this example, we've got someone capturing information, so you'll see there's a whole bunch of transaction IDs, dates, etc. But we want to set up and make sure that if they accidentally enter a duplicate number, so a number that's already been used here, it must give us some sort of a warning. It must tell us that that number's been used so that the person can correct it. You can either do it just with a number, or you can make it give you an actual OK or duplicate warning message. The solution to this example, so what we want is if I type a number in, for example if I type 100,198, I need this here to tell me that there's a problem. The way we're going to do that is we're going to say, please Excel, look at what that number is and compare it to all the numbers in this column and tell me how many times you see it. So we'll just go to the top so we can see it from here. So I'm going to use a COUNTIFs initially just to get the numbering, the counting. So we'll do a COUNTIFs. I know the criteria I'm looking for is whatever's in here. Where must Excel count those items? So I'm going to highlight all of these. And because this is meant to prevent future problems, I'm actually going to tell it to go all the way to here. Put the dollar signs on. When I say OK, you'll see it gives me a count. So it's telling me that this number already exists. I'm going to just copy this down. And you'll see it's gone all the way down there. So already it's warned us there's a couple of issues. But more importantly, if someone comes here now and, for example, enters 100, 170, when they click enter, you'll see immediately a 2 appears there. Now that's quite useful, and you can actually stop here because this is quite clear what's happening. However, if we wanted to make it a bit more user-friendly, we have the word OK or duplicate warning. And what I may do is around this COUNTIF, I'll type if, open brackets, if that COUNTIF is bigger than 1, then we're going to say duplicate warning, otherwise say OK. So when I copy it and I paste it all the way down, you'll see it tells us duplicate warning and OK. Now because of the way we set it up, when there are zeros, it also says OK, which makes sense. And only if someone comes here and types, for example, that number, will we get a new warning. If you had used, for example, is it equal to 1, then the risk is that the zeros would then give a warning. So you just have to think a little bit carefully about how you set up the if function. The real benefit of the new SUMIFs, COUNTIFs, the plurals, is that you can add more than one criteria. So for example here, we want to know the number of people selling more than 10 units. So that's similar to what we had here, except we want to know in department A, B, C. So this is where, if I'd ask you manually to do it, you'd say, okay, I'm only looking in A and A, it must be bigger than 10. So that one's not bigger than 10, it's equal to 10. That one's not, so therefore it's 0. So we're counting there. So we're going to pull up the COUNTIFs. Remember, we always suggest do the criteria first. So the first criteria is use that department there. Where must it go look for the department? I'm going to tell it it's over here and put my dollar signs on. When I click on criteria range 2, you'll see I get the second criteria. So we know it's more than 10 units. So over here I can come and in inverted commas say bigger than 10, close them, go back to criteria range 2. Where must it look for bigger than 10? In the units sold. Put my dollar signs on. And when I say OK, it then does the multiple tests. So let me just copy that down. So you'll see now I can see that in department B, so it's either that one or that one, there seems to be one person and it's that person there. So by building up your criteria, you can add a number of them, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of them, I think about up to 250 of them, which you can then use to work it out. Same thing with sum ifs, the plurals. So now we want to know what is the total sales based on this department and more than 10. So you'll see we're now going to use the sum ifs. So the first thing it asks is the sum range, so we're going to just give that. So that's the one difference from the count ifs. Put our dollar signs on. Criteria range 1, we first go to the criteria. I'm actually going to turn it around this time. So I'm actually going to say bigger than 10 and put it in inverted commas. Where must Excel look for the bigger than 10? It must look there in the units sold. Put my dollar signs on. Criteria range 2, I'm looking for department A. Where must I look for department A? In the department name. Put my dollar signs on. It's always useful. It looks like the sum range is going from row 4 to 12. Criteria range 4 to 12. Criteria range 4 to 12. So it's always useful to make sure that these all match. When I say OK, we get 0. That makes sense. And I copy it down, and I can now see, based on multiple criteria, what each department's doing, based on also total unit sales. In this example, we've got a whole bunch of data over here relating to phone calls. The type of phone call, so was it a text message or SMS, and was it a call, and what was the destination network to. We want to create something similar to a pivot table, but using formulas. So I want to know the total amount of cost to calls to Vodacom, then calls to MTN, etc. Same thing with the average. I want to then know what the average price is of a call to Vodacom, SMS to Vodacom, etc. The solution to this example, because we got multiple criteria here, so we're going to have to check the call type and the destination network. We're going to have to use the sum ifs, plural, and for the average we're going to have to use the average ifs. So we're going to set it up. So the first one here, we're going to do sum ifs. What is our sum range going to be? Well, we're going to add up the amount. I'm just going to highlight that, put my dollar signs on. Then we've got criteria range 1. So first I'm going to do the criteria. In this case I'm going to say look over here for Vodacom. Where must Excel look for that? Well, it must look for it here. And I'll put my dollar signs on. The second criteria then, because it's in the call column, when I click here I get criteria range 2 and criteria 2. I'm going to click on criteria 2 and say it must look at the call. Where must it look for the calls? So you'll see there's a type here. I can highlight all of that and put my dollar signs on. Now we could click OK now, but let's just investigate the dollar signs. So the sum range, we're happy it must always look there. Criteria range, so when we're looking at D36, it must always look at that column. I'm happy with that. But because I'm about to copy it across, I'm going to put a dollar sign in front of the D. So it doesn't matter where this goes, it must always look at column D for the name of the destination network. Criteria range 2, so we're now looking for call, which got to be careful. If I copy this down, I need to make sure that the row keeps looking at row 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to put the dollar sign there. Now when I say OK, it gives me a number. Let's copy it down. Now if we've done the dollar signs correctly, I should be able to take this area, copy it, and paste it into the SMSs. So it does look like it's working, because you can see these two numbers reconcile. And let's just have a quick look. So I'm going to go, and you'll see it's correctly looking at the correct column for the destination network, and it looks like it's looking at SMS. So it looks like we've done all the dollar signs correctly. Now let's do the average ifs. So we go here, we're going to say, we're going to use the average ifs. the average range. So again, we're going to highlight that area and put our dollar signs on. The criteria, we're going to say we want to look over there, and based on our knowledge from before, I'm going to put a dollar sign on the D. Where must it look for it? Here in the destination network, we can put dollar signs everywhere. And the second one, the criteria is going to be up here, and I know that I need a dollar sign on the row number. Where must it look for it? It must look for it here on the top. Dollar signs everywhere. When I say OK, it gives me a number, and I should be able to copy it down, and I should be able to copy it across. What you'll notice is I've got 2 division by 0 errors. In this case, it's actually correct. Have a look here. There are no SMSs. So if you want to avoid this, where you have a division by 0 error, perhaps you just want to see a 0, then what we could do is I'm going to use our if error. So around this average ifs, I'm going to type if error, and right at the end here I'm going to say comma 0. So when I copy and paste it, now those which would normally be an error are shown as zeros. In this example, we've set up our income statement. We've got some indicators up here. So this is telling us that these months, the first 6 months, belong to something called period 1. So that's the first semi-annual period, and that's the second semi-annual period. What we want to do is create something that will look at what semi-annual period we want, compare it to these cells, and then pull through the appropriate total for that period, for that product. The solution to this example, so we're going to have to use some ifs, because what we wanted to do is to look for the ones, so it'll find all of those, and then add up all of those. But if it's a 2, then it should add up all of those. So the function we're going to use is some ifs. The sum range, so we know that because we are on product X, it must look here. I'm going to put the dollar signs. Just keep in mind you must highlight the whole row. Don't do Excel's work for it. Don't only highlight the first 6 because you think you need to come up with the answer. In terms of the criteria, so I'm going to do the criteria first, and I'm going to say it must look over here. And I know that I always want it, no matter where I copy, it must always look at row 15, but it can move the columns. So I'm going to put a dollar sign here. Where must Excel look for these 1, 2, 3s? It must look over here. I'm going to put the dollar signs on. As it is, it'll work fine. If we want to be a bit more sophisticated, at the moment I've said look at product X, and it will always look at D8 to O8. I know I always wanted to look at D to O, but as I copy it down, it should go from row 8 to 9. So I know that I don't need the dollar sign in front of the number. When I click OK, I can now copy it across all the way down, and you'll see it's now calculating it. Let's just check this total for the first 6 months, 2921, 2921. The benefit of this now is if someone came to us and said, sorry, I didn't mean I wanted 6 months, I actually wanted quarters. Instead of having to change the formulas, I can just go here and make that 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4. And you'll see the report immediately updates itself. So now that is looking for all the ones, so now it's the first quarter. In this example, we've already worked out, here's the bank account numbers, and we have already found that there's a whole bunch of duplicates. So you can see it seems to be telling us there's 3 of those. Seems to be 3 of those. However, what we want to know now is what instance is this row of that number. So in this case, that would be the first instance. This one here is probably the first time it's seen this number. And as we go down over here, which seems to have the same number, I want to see a 2 there. So I want to know that that is the second instance. So I want to know in each case what instance number we are looking at. The solution to this example, the way we're going to get around this, if we do a normal count ifs, this, for example, looks here, looks everywhere, tells us it appears 3 times. The only way to get it to tell us that that's the first time is that each time we look, so when we look here, we must only compare it to the ones above. That way this will be the first time, but the next time it sees this number, it will show us the second time. So let's go here. I'm going to use the count ifs. The criteria stays the same. I'm going to say look for that bank account number. But in this case now, the criteria range, I'm going to click on the first cell. If I put a semicolon in there, you'll see it tells me from B7 to B7. So at the moment it's only looking there. But here the dollar signs are very important. So I'm going to go, and I'm not going to put dollar signs everywhere like we normally do. I'm only going to put them on the first B7. So what we're saying is when you're in this cell, count how many times you see that just over here. When I copy it down, you'll see as you go lower and lower, notice that this one's now saying how many times do I see that in that area there. So as you go further down, you'll discover, for example, here there are 2 of these, but this is the first time we've seen it. And as we scroll down, you'll see here's the second time we see something. So this is telling us that this person has appeared 3 times, but this is the second instance because this number, when you look, you'll discover it's appeared over here. So this allows you to create almost an index of which instance are you looking at of any particular duplicates. Sum ifs, average ifs, count ifs, and all those other ifs type functions also allows you to make use of wildcard characters, which means that you can do a partial search. So if you've understood how partial search in VLOOKUP works, you'll know that if we're looking in a list of products here, and we've got something like BioLotrin, but it's also known as just Lotrin, we can build a VLOOKUP that will search for just Lotrin. It will find this, so you'll see it pulls that through, and it can pull through the correct selling price. The problem with a partial lookup is that when you, for example, have VLOOKUP has gone and found these products. But if you look carefully, you'll see that's great, it's pulled those, but you could have easily been referring to that one or this one. So it's sometimes useful to be able to run some sort of a check to see, okay, good, VLOOKUP has found something, but do we need to check it because maybe it would have found more if it kept going. So in this case, we want to ask how many times does the word Lotrin appear somewhere in here. So in this case, because we asked the question how many times, it's a count ifs. We're going to build up our criteria first. So we're going to go here and we're going to say we want to look for that, whatever's in that cell there, but we're not sure, there might be something before it, and we tell it that by putting in inverted commas an asterisk or a multiplication sign and using my ampersand to create a bit of a concatenate before and after. So you'll see now I'm asking Excel to look for the word Lotrin, but there might be characters, and we don't know how many, but there might be before or after, and that's what the asterisk tells it. Where must Excel look for it? I'm going to give it this list here, and put the dollar signs on. And when I say OK, you'll see it tells me that this could only exist in one place. So it's pulled through one place, so there's a very good chance that these are correct. When I copy this down, you'll see it warns us immediately this could appear in 3 places. This one here could appear in 2 places. So as good as this partial lookup is sometimes, it is useful to be able to do just a quick count just to make sure whether you should go check and determine this product, for example, re-Finlax, is it referred to as re or is it refined? So with the count ifs, sum ifs, average ifs, etc., you can make use of wildcard characters to do partial lookups. In this example, we've got a whole lot of descriptions, job descriptions, and the employee number. And we want to work out how many have the word general labor in here. So somewhere in here there's the word general labor. How many have the word skilled, semi-skilled, skilled supervisor, general labor supervisor. The problem is that it could be like this, so it's very specific, or there could be other information around it. So for example, there if we're looking for skilled, this is a skilled diesel mechanic. It's considered skilled though. So we want to look up these designations but acknowledge that there might be text before or after it. So first we want to work out how many matches are there for that, how many non-matches for that, so it's the opposite of that, and then we want to look at any overlaps. So for example, when you look for skilled, it'll probably also find anyone with a semi-skilled and skilled supervisor. So we want to figure out a way that when we look for skilled, it ignores the semi-skilled and the skilled supervisor. The solution for this example, so what we've got here is we need to know how many of these cells have the word general labor in it. And it could be anywhere, there could be text before or after. So we're going to make use of our wildcard characters, and what we'll also do is make use of a count ifs. So let's use count ifs. So what we're asking for is, in this case, we wanted to look up anything that contains the word general labor. If we leave it like this, it's going to have to be general labor and nothing else around it. So the actual criteria is we can put wildcard characters. We're going to put an asterisk, the multiplication sign, an ampersand, the reference to the cell, another ampersand, inverted commas, an asterisk. So you can see we're looking for star, general labor star. Where must it look for it? Let's look for it in this column here. So that's fine. We say OK, and it tells us there's 4 cells, 4 people who match just that description. If we've done the dollar signs correctly, I should be able to copy it across, and you'll see there's 4 people that are general labor, 31 skilled, but we must be careful because the chances are in that 31 we've counted the semi-skilled and the skilled supervisor. And same here, these 4 probably contains this general labor supervisor. The next thing we need to do is do the non-matches. Now I suppose we could add this up and just subtract it, but I want to do it with a count ifs. So I'm going to go find and count ifs. And now the criteria is going to be it must not equal to whatever's in D4. Now what you'll notice is if I put my inverted commas here, that's not really going to help. What that's saying is don't equal the word D4 and nothing here equals D4. So we have to be a little bit more careful here. We need to create a reference. So in inverted commas, I'm going to put don't equals, and I'm going to put a star, that's our wildcard character, close the inverted commas. Then I'm going to put an ampersand and refer to this cell here, then put another ampersand and put the star in inverted commas. So you can see we're now telling it to, if anything that's not equal to the word general labor, but with the asterisk on either side, which is a wildcard character. Where must Excel look for it? In this column here, dollar signs, and when I say OK, you'll see it tells me there's 145 non-matching items. If the dollar signs are correct, I should be able to copy it across, and you'll see that in each case we add up to a total of 149, which seems to make sense because if there's so many of that, the opposite should add up to the same number. The last one is now we want to look at this. So we're going to look at general labor, but I wanted to find matches of general labor but exclude anywhere where it says general labor supervisor. So we're going to do a count ifs, but this time it's going to be, we'll have to use a few criteria. So what's the first criteria? We're saying, is it equal to, and because it's a partial match, I'm going to put my asterisks and whatever's in there, and in inverted commas the next one. We must look for that. Let's look for it in this. So that's fine. However, we've got a second requirement, and the second requirement is, so I'm going to put inverted commas, it must not equal to, I'm going to put my star, close inverted commas, put the ampersand, and tell it to look for that word there. Put the ampersand, inverted commas, and the star. Where must it look for this? This must look in here. So what we're saying here is it must go here and look for general labor, and it can be in any form. And normally it would then include wherever there's the word general labor supervisor. But we've explicitly told it, it must not equal general labor supervisor. So when we say OK, you'll see it gives us 3, which makes sense. There were 4 of these, 1 of these, so presumably that one is sitting in there, so the answer is 3. This one's going to be one more requirement because we've got 3 items that we want to use. So we want to look at skilled, but we want to exclude where it's been used in semi-skilled and skilled supervisor. So we're going to again do a count ifs. First part's going to be the same. The criteria is we're going to look for skilled, but we need the asterisk in front of it. So I'm going to put in inverted commas asterisk, ampersand, ampersand, asterisk in the inverted commas. Where must Excel look for that? In this column. Range 2, we're now saying look at that semi-skilled, but we don't want it to equal that. So in inverted commas, I'm going to put not equal to star, inverted commas, ampersand. So you can see we building it up here. Ampersand, star. So that looks correct. Where must it go look for that? Over here with my dollar signs. And the last one, if I just drop down here, there's criteria range 3. So again, same thing. I'm going to say look at whatever's in there, but we actually don't want to look at it. So in inverted commas, not equal to star, inverted commas, and you'll see it's building it up. Ampersand, in inverted commas, asterisk, dollar signs. And when I say OK, you'll see it gives us 26, which again does seem to make sense. 31 minus the 4 semi-skilled and 1 skilled supervisor is 26. In this example, we've got some product names and their selling prices. We've also got what they're known as, sort of a generic shortened name. And using VLOOKUP and wildcard characters, we've pulled through what we think the matching name is and that we think the selling price is. Problem is that certain of the generic names actually appear here more than once. So once we've done this, before we can actually rely on it, we need to check, what do we need to check? Is there perhaps another Lotron? Or, for example, here we've got string, but string appears twice. So if these are 2 different products, we must be careful. They probably won't have a matching name and they won't be the same selling price. So we need to figure out how many possible matches are there for this partial name in this list. The solution for this example, what we're going to do is count how many times this partial name would be found in this list over here. So we're going to use count ifs. And the criteria here is going to be what the product is known as, but because there could be something before or after it, we put inverted commas, asterisk, inverted commas, ampersand. So you'll see it's building it up. Put an ampersand and an asterisk. Where must it go look for that? Let's go look in here. Put our dollar signs. When I say OK, we'll see there's only one match for that. When I copy it down. So for most of these they're one, but every now and again you've got something like that where there's two possible matches. So you need to be careful and just make sure that those particular items are pulling through the correct item. So was this one, should it have pulled through the AND string, which is this one here, the 516, or is that actually the shortened name for the string echo, which is that number there? So generally speaking, at this stage we'd put our filter on, and anything that's not equal to a 1 we need to investigate and make sure that it is the correct information. But it's better than having to go through each one of these and manually try and match them. In this example, we've got information of the HR system with the first name, surname, and using VLOOKUP with some wildcard characters, we figured out what the email address probably is, given that the email system records the names like this. What we're worried about is if there's people with the same surname and perhaps we put in the wrong information through. So what we want to check is how many times does this surname get matched in this list, because VLOOKUP will pull the first one, but it may actually be the second or third one. The solution to this example, we're going to make use of COUNTIFs. So we're going to use COUNTIFs, and what we're saying is, look at that surname, but there could be something else around the surname, so I'm going to put in inverted commas, asterisk, ampersand, asterisk in inverted commas, and tell Excel to go compare it to these list of names from the IT system. When I say OK, for example, burger seems like it's only found once, so we're fairly confident that's the correct email address. If I copy it down, you'll see, for example, highball, that is an email address, but there's two that could have matched. So perhaps we need to just check these and make sure that the person we're referring to is actually the correct person. In this example, we've got some lists. You'll see there's a list 1 and lower down there's a list 2. But somehow they've duplicated, so we need to, using formulas, figure out where the duplicates are and only get the unique values. And a duplicate is when columns A to F are exactly the same. So first we need to figure out how we're going to identify what a duplicate is, and then how we're going to get it out just to see the unique list. The solution to this example, the first thing we need to do is, in order to identify if something's a duplicate across that many columns, Excel's not great with formulas that run across all these columns. So we're going to create a column here, and what this is going to do is just combine all these cells together. So we're going to use concatenate, and we're going to say we just want it to look there, and then there, and there. So all we've done is hopefully create a unique listing. So you'll see it looks like that, and on its own it doesn't look very useful. But keep in mind, now we can tell Excel to look how many times it sees that in this list, and because it's an exact concatenation of these, it should help us with it. Now, in order to check for duplicates, what we want Excel to do is to say, look at that and see if you can see it again anywhere in this list. Another way to say that is, please Excel, count how many times you see this item in this list all the way down to the bottom. So in that case, we're going to use our count ifs. So we could use count if, but I'm going to use count ifs. And all I've got to say is what's the criteria. So I'm going to go there first and say that's the criteria. And where's the range? I'm going to highlight the entire range and put it in dollar signs. When I say OK, it tells me 2. So it means that it's seen this twice. I can double click. And what you'll see is I've got lots of 2s and then I've got some 1s. So we want to just know where the unique ones are. So what I can do, I'm just going to put my filter on. And now that I've got a filter, I can just go here and say I'm only interested in the uniques where there's a 1 here. And you'll see the list is quite short. And then I can take that and copy it and paste it somewhere. So for now, because where I want to go is hidden, I'm just going to paste it there. You can see the numbers are there. And I can copy and paste this here. The sum ifs, count ifs, average ifs have their own risk areas. With Excel Analyzer, I can come here and let's go find any sum ifs in the spreadsheet. So you'll see there's a sum if, but I'm looking at the moment for sum ifs, plural. So I'm going to choose it. And what you'll see is we've now got the listing. As a general rule with sum ifs, count ifs, average ifs, max ifs, min ifs, all of those statements, the items that you're looking at, the sum range and the criteria range, as a rule, generally should have dollar signs on them. Because that is generally with the tables, you're asking it to look at the same table to work out what it's looking for and what it's adding together. So if you look at this one, you'll see there's no dollar signs on the first one or the second one. And even this one here, there's a dollar sign on the first part, but not on the second part. So let's go look at if these are correct. So you'll see that is looking there. Let's trace the formulas. So that doesn't look bad. You can see it seems to be matching up. But remember, with dollar signs, the issue is never going to be in the first one. So let's click on the next one. And you'll notice as you drop down, because of the lack of dollar signs, it is actually dropping down with it. So this appears to be an error. I'm just going to go back to the formula report so I can use, first I'm going to switch off the reset tracing parisons. This one as well seems to be a bit of a risk. It talks about F11 but no dollar signs, E11 dollar signs. So let's go see what that one looks like. Same area. Let's go trace formula. So again, the first one looks fine. And now what you'll see is in this case, the dollar sign at the bottom is stopping this from moving, but the area we're looking at is getting less and less. As a result, you're likely to have missed out something. With sum ifs, count ifs, average ifs, there is a risk that the criteria is wrong. So if we look at some of these, you'll see this is the criteria here. We need to decide if those are a problem. We can go look at them. But let's see if we can find a better one. So here the criteria again seems to be looking at a formula. Just going to look here. So here's one. You'll see we've got a sum ifs. And notice the criteria seems to be a typed in word. So we've got annual and sick. So the question is, should that be there? Shouldn't it be a formula? Is it spelled correctly, etc.? So what we need to do is go look at it. And you'll see here, we'll be able to go and check it. And we can decide whether that should be annual or not. So again, I'm going to go click on the original sheet. It takes me there. It's saying go look, and the one we're interested in is this one here. So let's go see. We go to that criteria, and if you look there, it does seem to have the word annual. So you would need to look and just make sure that they're all spelled the same way, and there is no risk that because of the way it's been set up, the hard-coded text, it will not find perhaps the correct information. When looking at SUMIFs, COUNTIFs, AVERAGEIFs, the other risk is that if special criteria are used, so let's go look at a COUNTIFs. What you'll see if I scroll down, if you look here, you'll see the criteria has got a logical test in it. So these you have to be careful on, because should it be less than 0, or perhaps should it be less than and equal to 0, or perhaps it should be bigger than 0 or bigger than a number. So it's worthwhile checking any of those. The older SUMIF, COUNTIF, AVERAGEIF, etc. without the S at the end, these older functions have some risks. What we can do is we can go to the Excel Analyzer report, and we can find all the SUMIF. Now notice I'm not doing the SUMIFs at the moment. SUMIF, and when I click on it, it will bring up a list of all the SUMIF formulas in the spreadsheet, and then we can look through them for the risky aspects. The old SUMIF, excluding the S, so only a SUMIF, COUNTIF, AVERAGEIF, had a unique problem. So you'll see we've identified the SUMIF. When we look here, when you look at the sum range and the criteria range, they should be the same. So you can see that goes from row 10 to row 14. That goes 10 to 14. If we scroll down, if we look at this one here, you'll notice it goes from 24 to 36, but the other range goes from 24 to 48. Now with the older functions, this was actually allowed. In the new function, SUMIFs, it actually won't allow you to do that. It has to be the same size. But in this case, it allowed it. And those are high risk. So if we go look at them, and we go trace formulas, you'll see that they mismatched. And the way Excel handled it was to, once it reaches the end of this area, it actually goes back up and redoes it, which means that these numbers are incorrect. So a SUMIF, COUNTIF, AVERAGEIF, generally speaking, whether it's columns or rows, it should be the same size. And there is a risk that this slips through. Generally speaking, with a SUMIF, COUNTIF, AVERAGEIF, anywhere that's looking at a table, we expect dollar signs to be on the references, because it's rare that you want it to move around where it's looking. So in this SUMIF, you'll see that the criteria range has got dollar signs on the letters and the numbers. But if I look at the sum range, you'll see it's only on the numbers. So that exhibits a risk. Let's go look at it. So you'll see we've got a SUMIF and a quick test. I'm going to go tracing formulas. You'll see it seems to be looking at that area. And as I go across now, I'm not going to go straight. I'm going to go down and across. So notice that's actually making sense. So it seems to be looking continually here. And then what it's summing moves across. So that one actually doesn't look too bad. So what we're going to do is go back to the formula report. So there's that. And let's go see if we can find another one. You'll see that seems to have dollar signs everywhere. Here, can you see this is now looking at another sheet. But notice no dollar signs on the sum and criteria ranges. So that's a risk. And we can see that there's 20 copies of it. So that is a risk, especially when no dollar signs are used. So let's go look at it. So here's the formula. For this one, I'm just going to go back. You'll see there's an option here to go to the original sheet. So I'm just going to look at the original sheet. I can see there's a SUMIF, that's where it's looking. So let's look at this one. I'm going to use my trace precedence button. And let's go look at what it's looking at. And you can see it's highlighted the area, and that looks fine. Now just to get back to where I was, I'm going to push F5 enter, and it takes us straight back there. But keep in mind that it's very rare that people make a problem in the first formula they build. So we shouldn't be looking here ever. We should go a little bit lower. So let's go to that one there. And now let's do a trace precedent. And let's look at what the criteria range is. And you'll notice because there's no dollar signs, it seems to have missed the top. And it's including some blanks. Again, F5 enter. Let's go look at what the sum range was doing. So the same thing. You can see, and that looks like an error. It seems to have missed some data. And it's including some nonsense data down here. So I'm just going to go F5 enter. So these are high risk and need to be investigated. With a SUMIF, COUNTIF, AVERAGEIF, it is important as well to consider what is being looked up. So we can see this is the criteria range, that's the sum range, and this is what's going to decide whether we add it or not. So the reason this is a risk with SUMIF in particular is because unlike VLOOKUP, where if it can't find it, it gives an error message, with a SUMIF, if it can't find it, it just brings back 0. So the result is 0. So if we go look at this, so you'll see here, we've got a SUMIF. Let's see where it's looking. So it seems to be looking there. And when I highlight them all, so in this case, it actually doesn't look like a problem. Basically, it's always looking over there. Where it becomes a risk is if this was copied to the right, what is it looking at? Is it looking up the proper number, or have we accidentally forgotten or included dollar signs? And as a result, it's not actually seeing the number we're looking for. A risk with a SUMIF, COUNTIF, AVERAGEIF is what is the criteria used. So I'm just going to change this. Let's go look at see if there's any COUNTIF here. So there's a COUNTIF. When I click on it, Excel Analyzer gets us the COUNTIF. And you'll see we can now look through the list. And you'll see we've got some COUNTIF, and we can look at them. Notice one of the COUNTIF has as its criteria not a reference to a cell or a number, but it actually has a logical test. So what this is saying is COUNTIF, and because of the inverted commas, is less than 0. So when I click and go look at it, you'll see that looks fine. Go trace formulas, so that's fine. So the risk here is it's looking at the right place. It looks like it's saying less than 0. The question here is because it's a logical test, perhaps that should say less than and equal to 0, or should say bigger than. So when you have got special criteria in here, you just need to be careful that it is using the correct logical function.